Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Anusha and I'll be your host for today. Welcome to Mike's webinar series, Road to Recovery. Episode 3, Going Digital, a New Normal in Higher Education. With us today, we have our moderator, Dr. Liz Alexandra, Senior SSA at Mike, and distinguished panelists. Dr. Dato' Engineer Abdul Rahim Hashim, Vice Chancellor of University of Malaya, Dr. Elizabeth Lee, CEO of Sunway Education Group. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping rules. First, participants must mute your microphones and turn off your video upon entrance. For those who are joining via mobile, please press *6 to mute. Questions to panelists are to be addressed in a chat box after the moderator announced the Q&A session is open. Lastly, if you encounter any audio problems, please alert the Secretariat, Sarah or Razif, chat box, or try to exit and re-enter the seminar using the same link given. Now, with pleasure, I would like to invite Dr. Lee to begin our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Anusha. And it is wonderful to see so many participants coming online. And I look forward to posing your questions to our two panelists at the end of our organic discussion, which will take us up to the top of the hour. And then we'll have the final 30 minutes for a Q&A. So be sure to use the chat feature, as Anusha has just said, for comments and questions. Send them along as they occur to you. And please stay with us till the end. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed panelists today. First, Datuk Abdul Rahim Hashim is Vice Chancellor of the University Malaya. He graduated in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from the University of Birmingham, UK in 1976, at which point he went to work for Petronas and was there for 32 years, holding a variety of key positions. He later received an honorary doctorate in engineering from the same university. As a professional engineer, Datuk Rahim boasts a long and illustrious career, sitting on a variety of industry and company boards. In addition to many other positions, he is currently chairman of the Malaysian Research University Network. In October 2016, he was admitted as a William Pitt Fellow by the Pembroke College of Cambridge, a UK university that will be mentioned again in a moment. So welcome and thank you for spending this time with us today, Datuk Rahim.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, Dr. Elizabeth Lee, is Chief Executive Officer of Sunway Education Group. And having been in the industry for over 30 years, her name has become synonymous with private education in Malaysia. She has grown the group from the single Sunway College in the early 1990s to a formidable group of some 16 different education institutions and centres, owned and governed by the Jeffrey Chia Foundation that cater to students of all ages and disciplines from preschool to PhD. Educated for most of her school years at the Bukit Bintang Girls' School in Kuala Lumpur, Dr. Lee left for further studies abroad as an exchange student in the USA, and then on to the UK for sixth form, which I remember well myself, and university studies specializing in multicultural education and eventually psycholinguistics at postgraduate level at Cambridge University. There it is again. She has been awarded 2 honorary doctorates by Nottingham University in the UK and the Victoria University in Melbourne, Australia. So again, welcome Elizabeth, and thank you for taking part in our Road to Recovery series.
Thank you very much, Liz.
So before we start the conversation, which I say is going to be very organic, allow me a few moments to set the scene. You know, the term the new normal isn't new, having apparently been coined back in 2002 by a high-tech investor in the US. Back then, It was used to describe the new philosophy that businesses needed to embrace after a recession. Today, we face an even more dramatic and devastating global challenge, the novel coronavirus called COVID-19, that in addition to the human suffering through illness and death, has severely impeded everyone's movements and requires all of us to physically distance ourselves from one another, which is why we're meeting here online via WebEx rather than congregating in person in a conference room somewhere. Some see the pandemic as driving a long overdue revolution in education, forcing universities to move their courses online. After all, what other choice is there when, according to the World Economic Forum, currently there are approximately 1.5 billion students, that's almost 90% of global graduates, who are no longer physically able to attend their institutions. On the other hand, can a digital education offer the same depth of engagement between educators and students, let alone between students themselves, as classroom sessions do? And will our assumptions around digital literacy prove to be problematic? I suspect our current new normal will evolve as we strive to create an educational model that meets our changing circumstances while still providing a quality experience for all students. So there are plenty of challenges. I'd now like to ask each of our panelists for their own brief overview before I kick off the conversation proper. So Elizabeth, what are your thoughts? Are we in the throes of a long overdue revolution in education?
I love that question because when you think about it, education is about one of the last things to change. I always joke that universities are such haloed institutions and sometimes not even allowed to change. And some of these institutions, as we talked about Oxford and Cambridge, they date back to so long ago and hardly anything changes, you know. So yeah, I think we're due for a great shock to the whole industry. And yes, and it is upon us, indeed.
Perhaps evolution and revolution will be going on at the same time.
Evolution is a little bit slow. This is much more a revolution because it hits us in the face, you know, and it's forcing us to change beyond our wildest dreams.
Yes, unfortunately. So, Datuk Rahim, what would you like to add as an overview of our topic before we start on with the questions?
Thank you, Liz. When you actually look at the education overall, I agree with Liz that over the last 1,000 years, it has actually not changed very much in terms of how knowledge is being, I guess, disseminated to students as such. If you look in terms of even the Cambridges and the Oxfords of this world, has been 800 years doing almost the same thing. Right? So now is that perhaps a great time, an opportune time for the sector itself to almost revolutionize itself, and in terms of going forward with all the technology that's available to us to make it happen. And when we talk about remote learning or online learning, it has been around for a while. You take, for example, Open University has been around since 1969, late 60s, yeah? And it has been around for about 50 years, which has its own reputation, produces quality graduates and so on and so forth. So the issue is that for us, why is it has not picked up by the other 28,000 universities around the world in terms of doing a similar approach in that sense? So it is, again, something which perhaps opportune time that we take this opportunity of really looking in terms of how knowledge is being, I guess, shared or disseminated to whoever is interested in learning.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the Open University in the UK. That's actually how I acquired my undergraduate degree, because I was actually working and didn't want to give up the money and the opportunities. And so I did my undergraduate degree at the same time. And here's a little factoid for everyone. I'm glad you said it has a very good reputation. There's there was a TV program in the UK called University Challenge, and in fact the team from Open University bested, I can't remember whether it was one of the Cambridge colleges or one of the Oxford colleges, but we came out on top. So go Open University. So I can definitely applaud that kind of education, although it was very much blended learning. So thank you for mentioning that. So let me ask you this, Elizabeth. What in your experience have been the most immediate changes necessary in the higher education sector as a result of COVID-19?
I think the immediate change for everyone was turning online. That's the most obvious immediate change. I mean, there was no choice in the matter, was there? Students and staff, their well-being and safety were the overriding concern. And I remember all the way since January, and to allow for the flexibility of learning from home at that point for those with concerns or were in quarantine, as we required all our international students who were coming from China at that point and eventually Iran too, that is before the borders closed, that they be on the 2 weeks quarantine before being allowed onto campus. So those students needed to learn online as well. And so we actually did a dual track to allow for the students who were here on campus to learn face-to-face. And for those who were away, then they had that opportunity to be supported online. So staff had already started providing online support. So we embraced a kind of dual track, as I mentioned. And it allowed for us what I call the soft landing, because when MCO happened and we had to go fully online to ensure our students' continuous learning and academic progress, we could do so. So in line with this change, we needed to enhance our IT infrastructure in order to support the online education more adequately, so that our students and even our staff can enjoy the online learning experience much more. Then the second change is actually communication. We need to communicate a lot more now. We are, after all, social beings, and all that social distancing is affecting us. And all the more we need to stay connected via much more communication with each other. And perhaps that's why there's been a lot more WhatsApp chat groups being set up and the sharing of information. And of course, unfortunately, some of this information includes fake news. And the third important change, which I noticed in higher education, that is mindset. How we think about what is important, such as grades, qualifications, and examinations.
Yes.
We sacredly hold on to these, but are they really all that relevant in a new normal? I mean, let's look at exams. We used to slave over ensuring integrity and authenticity of the person sitting the exams, and to ensure that there's no cheating, right?
Yes.
And we base a student's whole future on how well he or she was able to ace the exam. But is that what life is all about? Even Cambridge University International Exams cancelled their all-important A-level exams and opted for predicted grades based on a student's overall continuous performance, which I really feel is much more accurate than to pronounce how academically capable a person is based on just his or her ability to regurgitate facts during exam conditions. So the way we prize certain qualifications over others is another thing. Isn't performance more important rather than, especially in this new normal, that we have this ability to think broadly away from our specializations, because certain qualifications could be very specialized. So as we were just discussing before this webinar, Liz, we were just saying that, you know, what we have been trained in, we don't seem to be using it today.
Yes.
And so I always said, you know, we end up having to think out of the box. And I always joke about how COVID has actually destroyed the box. So, and because we really need new solutions and we need to create new knowledge. But last but not least, on the immediate changes that I saw is that suddenly I felt that we needed to ensure business sustainability. We saw vulnerability and we saw the risks involved. What if one of us was sick? And does that mean we close down the whole organization? My goodness, we have 17,000 students. What are we going to do? And does that mean everyone is quarantined? So business sustainability was something that we needed to look, business continuity, as we call it, or operational continuity was something that we needed to look into. But of course, I mentioned business sustainability, and this is something that happened, you know, over the weeks as the reality set in, and we realized the real threat to the business is coming on board. Yes. I must say that at Sunway, we are lucky because we are supported by the Jeffrey Chia Foundation. Ooh. And our founder and chairman of the Sunway Group of Companies and chancellor of the university, actually, Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia. He is very, very specific about making sure of our business viability and what he needs to do to support all of us. So we have been very, very lucky in that respect. Yeah.
So comprehensive challenges, but you make an important point there. With the old model, things like dedicated exams kind of supported a particular personality. I loved exams, never had any problems with them, but I know that a lot of my peers would get extremely anxious and were not showing themselves to their best ability. And I think one of the watchwords for today is employability, which is not about can you pass an exam, but are you going to be of value to a future employer? So thank you for that comprehensive overview. Datuk Rahim, do you have anything additional to add on the immediate changes? Or could I ask you the question about how you see impacts changing over time? Obviously, this is a moving goalpost. What additional changes are we likely to see, say, over the next 1 to 5 years?
Thank you, Liz. I think if I would to add a bit more to what Liz has said just now, apart from that particular mind change, the mind change actually that happened in the very short term is actually this teaching and learning approach, which is transforming from the linear and fixed outcome driven to a more flexible and responsive, agile teaching and learning approach. I think that's important because what we're trying to do all along is to have the so-called blended learning, where you have the students doing homework, doing their research prior to coming to class, doing it online, and subsequently having the lecturers or the academician facilitating the process, where at the same time you're actually developing attributes of communication, teamwork, and so on and so forth. So it gives us the impetus in terms of accelerating that particular approach of teaching and learning. And for us is that the so-called remote learning has been around since 2016, where we started it off as sort of an initiative on a week basis. And then subsequently, when we had the haze last year, it forces us to do remote learning for about 2 weeks in September. And subsequently with COVID-19, it sort of gave the impetus on a large scale basis. Now, the question is that, of course, there are challenges to that when you do something which is on an emergency basis, whether the students themselves are ready, whether the lecturers themselves are ready. So this actually gives us the platform for a change of focus also at the same time, from the so-called one-size-fits-all curriculum and workforce planning to something that is more personalized, more student-driven, flexible education. So you've been provided that platform to sort of undertake the so-called big, huge step change as far as teaching and learning is concerned. Now, obviously, if you go beyond the immediate term, the question asked is, what will happen in the next 1 to 5 years? And when you look in terms of what's going to happen as far as COVID-19 is concerned, well, we won't see the vaccine in the next, perhaps in the same time frame as well. So the issue is that even though the Ministry of Education or Higher Education have stated that we all need to go online until end of this year, I foresee that at least it will go into next year, into the next academic year for a start, as far as the online learning is concerned. But once you take the hang of it in terms of the benefits of remote learning or online learning, then the question is that, would you want to go back to the present or the past approach of teaching and learning? And this is something perhaps we need to look at very, very carefully. Yeah, obviously there are some downsides as far as remote learning is concerned, but there are positives as well. There are a lot of pros in that, and we foresee that this is something which has happened now could actually be the new normal as far as teaching and learning is concerned going forward. So the mid-range impact is that it will be having to strengthen the infrastructure that's required, for this to happen, and at the same time making sure that both the students as well as the lecturers, the academicians, are well prepared to perhaps further enhance the offerings, and you may actually get a lot of new skills that's required. For example, the designers of the program coming up, which perhaps we have not seen yet, to provide that sort of enhanced version of what online learning is concerned. And the way that we think about learning, knowledge, education will definitely be shifting. And what we term as education may even be different altogether. And we then are given the opportunity of perhaps looking at micro-credentialing, certificates, where you do bits and pieces and then you collect them, and you can actually then come up with the degrees. So that provides us with the so-called diverse learning providers. And in some respect, would that culminate in a university degree or otherwise? So the notion of this so-called conventional learning may actually be thrown out of the window as far as that's concerned, even in the short period of within 1.5 years to 2 years from now. But obviously, there are challenges which we need to address in terms of, yes, what about the richness of having a campus interacting within lecturers, within students, between students themselves, and so on and so forth. Definitely that needs to be addressed. But there could be a shift in the university's core identity at the same time. How are we going to offer the so-called modular, perhaps introduce the technology of blockchain in terms of micro-credentialing and so on and so forth? So the opportunity provided for this is actually quite massive. And the question is that how do we take this on board and make it into something which is an experience which perhaps value add to the students from what they are getting now in terms of face-to-face interaction that we have at present.
Yes. Well, before we get to the specific opportunities and the specific challenges of online learning a little bit more, let's dive into that topic that both of you have raised. One about how ready are the lecturers? And of course, that speaks, Elizabeth, doesn't it, to the sustainability of your business as well. So to what extent, I mean, what kind of reskilling or relearning are educators going to have to embrace in this new digitally focused normal? Specifically, how will they need to think differently about their roles in supporting students' learning in order to offer more appropriate support?
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, this is one question that I love as well, because it's really challenging the supposed font of all knowledge, the teacher, the lecturer, the professor, the educator. I think, wasn't it Sir Ken Robinson who asked us to get out of our minds, as he said that at the heart of the transformation to a digital world, we first need to have a radically different view or thinking on how we should prepare our graduates. And in fact, this was a few years ago, but all the more relevant today. We all know that we need to keep learning, but
Yes.
there's no more, you know, as we now need to so much more to, as you say, to relearn or even reskill. And I dare to venture that for some of us, we even need to learn how to learn all over again. So there is this talk about needing to unlearn, in fact, so that we can relearn how to learn all over again. And if anyone is confused by what I just said, then that's exactly what is needed. Because in this new normal, the new learning needed is about how to learn all over again with a totally fresh mindset that Datuk Rahim mentioned, and to be able to see things through new eyes, if I can say, with a totally new way of thinking. So as educators, we must, first of all, change ourselves. Our students, I like the way our ministry calls them our warga. They need to live and function in the future. But that future is actually upon us already. It has dawned upon us much sooner than anticipated. It has arrived at our doorsteps. So we need to make a mighty leap ourselves to learn about this new reality, equip ourselves with the necessary new knowledge and learning before we can guide our students to offer them that best support that they need to learn for themselves alongside us. In medicine, there had been tremendous focus on precision medicine. In education, Datuk Rahim mentioned a personalized education. And this is very, very well what we're facing right now, using online learning to engage our students at an individual level, ensuring precision and personalized education. And then, of course, being able to individually work with students and find out specifically what each student's needs are, allows educators to take that important step of actually helping their students succeed. The whole online learning method provides a great way to track individual student outcomes, if you think about it. And you mentioned reskill. Funnily enough, as educators, especially in the universities, the higher our academic credentials, the more focused our expertise becomes, and the more conscious we become of social expectations. But this new norm actually forces us to be multi-skilled and adaptable, with new rule books being written every day. So now you're not just a psycholinguist, okay? But we are Zoomists, learning how to use Zoom, including also being comfortable in front of a video camera, like what we're doing right now. You know, I was just saying that, you know, at one point, Liz, you're down here, and I have to look at you, and then the chats are over there, you know, and where should we be focusing? It's really difficult, you know, looking into a camera. I can't do it. The willingness to try and experiment with new digital pedagogical tools and assessment methods, and the humility to co-learn with our students is definitely key in this whole process. And it's like tango. It takes both the learner and the educator to work together and find their rhythm. I think that's basically it.
No, that's a great point. So you've both raised very important points with regard to the role of university leaders in helping to transition the Malaysian higher education sector in this era of COVID-19. But Dr. Rahim, let me ask you, what do you consider, because there has to be other partners in this too, what do you consider to be the role of government in bringing forth the best possible new normal? What's their role?
Obviously, you have to look in terms of what the role of, I guess, government in this sense, because in our case, we have the Ministry of Higher Education, which is both a regulatory body, yeah, as well as a policy-making body at the same time. So I guess for them is I think handing out the right policies, encouraging the right policies for this to happen. I guess more in depth, and perhaps at the same time being not so prescriptive in nature, because with the platform that we're given, is that there's a lot of creativity, a lot of innovativeness that will come out from this particular exercise, which provides, I guess, another area where universities themselves will somehow transform itself into being able to provide specific offerings, specific offerings, which could actually be different from one versus the other. So we're not going to sort of standardize how the approach is going to be, but I think more of a general overview in terms of what is expected, and just leave the universities to decide in terms of what needs to be done, and what exactly is the outcome as far as students' attributes are concerned, students the quality of the teaching and the learning is preserved. I think those are the areas that perhaps they should be looking at, and perhaps on the regulatory side, well, I guess everybody knows about MQA, is perhaps the flexibility that needs to be given so that you further enhance remote learning or online learning to the extent that it is, again, not prescriptive or descriptive in that sense. And the other areas that perhaps the government could do, because with remote learning, you require accessibility. You require what do you call the telecommunication connectivity and so on and so forth. So perhaps because it is an infrastructure that's required, so that is where one would actually require assistance from the government to make sure that the connectivity is, I guess, the reachability is throughout the country, because now you can actually learn not just being on campus, but from all over the country. No matter how remote you are, you should be able to access that. So that is actually one of the biggest challenges that we have as far as remote or online learning is concerned. So you have various, I guess, role that the government could play to further enhance, encourage the so-called remote and online learning.
Yes, I mean, I see you nodding there, Elizabeth. I wonder if you have anything additional to add there around government. But since we mentioned employability and how important that is, I'm also wondering if you could weave in what you believe industry's role needs to be in this transition.
Sure. Now, I just wanted to add to what Datuk Rahim said. It is very important that the government continue in this direction of, towards giving actionable autonomy, flexibility, and adaptability for our institutions to drive the change, which is in line with the needs and demands of the new normal, and so that we can work together and our nation remains internationally competitive. And this is very important because, we need to see how we fit into the whole global scenario as well in providing quality education for all. And Datuk Rahim also mentioned the MQA, the Malaysian Qualifications Agency. I happen to be, sitting on their board for my second term now, and I must say that they have been amazingly facilitative and also very open-minded in supporting and driving the necessary change to support this new normal. In fact, I want to have a shout out to our Ministry of Higher Education, as they have been engaging with institutions and organizations that represent the institutions like our MAPCU, Malaysian Association of Private Universities and Colleges, and they've been doing this for actually quite a few years. And recently they published an important document, which is way forward for private higher education institutions, education as an industry, which is important because it's recognizing education and private education in this respect as an industry in its own right. And in this document, actually, it details the significant role of that private higher education plays in driving our country's future and economy, and how the government can actually help ensure that at least the private higher education institutions move towards becoming a high impact industry. So they actually identified 5 areas which are still very valid today. And these were agile governance, institutional sustainability, very important, transformed delivery, innovation and teaching excellence, and last but not least, internationalization, which I mentioned earlier on. And then weaving in the role of industry that you asked me about. Oh my, we need the industry. After all, they take our graduates, we produce and provide them with their needed talents. So we really need to listen to them and see what it is that industry needs of us. And they also need to listen to us too and see how to best support us, to best provide for them with a workforce that they will need to propel their own industries. So the industry has to be collaborative rather than competitive, and to ensure that we serve the nation's purpose, the people's interests, while maintaining the sustainability of our businesses, whether it's theirs or ours. And we at the universities certainly need to shed our ivory towers, as I can put it that way, and reach out to the various stakeholders, whether they be in the government, the industry, and even society. We have to communicate the role that we serve in nation building and prove our relevance by providing the solutions that are needed by society and industry. So if I may just talk a little bit about what we do at Sunway. We have through iLabs, we have our innovation labs, and we also have this Alibaba GET program that we are running. And we have done this e-commerce jumpstart program, which is supposed to assist SMEs to understand and survive and capitalize on the current challenges and opportunities. And we have to continue to ensure that the programs we offer will result in our graduates that are fit for the needs of the industry. And that is why we continuously engage industry leaders to inform and improve our curriculum, as well as to engage our students. So our investments into our university laboratories and research and innovation centers, such as the Sunway iLabs that I mentioned earlier, even our Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development, and our Jeffrey Chia Biomedical Center, which is actually in Cambridge and doing amazing work now, supporting looking for the vaccine and the cure for COVID. So we hope to be able to further collaborate and assist the government and of course also the various industries to weather this storm and emerge as major players in their field of the industry.
That's great. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Let me bring this to the personal, really personal realm. Before we came on air, Elizabeth and I were talking about my degrees are in educational psychology. And she said, well, you're a person, aren't you? And I said, absolutely. So I'm concerned about, we know, for example, that even adults often have difficulty working from home. Things like focus and discipline are a challenge for a lot of people. And earlier this week, I live in a condo, and earlier this week, there was renovation work going on with jackhammering and bang, bang, banging, so that we know that not every environment is conducive to learning. So Datuk Rahim, in addition to what you were saying about the government needing to provide connectivity, what about this realm of what do we do when a student's environment isn't as conducive to effective learning as we would like it to be because of a lack of privacy or noise or other challenges?
I guess there are actually several solutions to it, because for us, as an example, for University of Malaya, we have 60% of our students are actually coming from B40 families, yeah, for which if you look in terms of remote learning, then they are actually coming from families perhaps in the first instance, they will not have adequate connectivity is one, but you mentioned in terms of the learning environment itself, yeah, the learning environment which perhaps is not conducive when you have got a small, I guess, space to work on, and perhaps siblings around and so on and so forth, it may not be conducive. So this is where we think the collaboration with other institutions comes into place, where you could actually, if you do a synchronous teaching as an example, if somebody from Sabah, for example, staying in KK, could actually use the facilities of UMS as an example. Yeah, we have that sort of arrangement, or even somebody who's actually in Miri, staying in a place where you don't get connectivity, or even for that matter, right environment to work on. We could use one of those private universities facilities in Miri itself for you to work on. So there are actually ways and means of addressing those, I guess, restrictions, yeah, or handicaps that we can see, or that we foresee in terms of to have effective learning. Well, in terms of connectivity, we are actually working with telcos, yeah, to provide, I guess, something which is more affordable. And the bandwidth provided for is actually big. So when we look in terms of the experiences that we have, some of the programs that we have, where we have got students in Langkawi, remote in Langkawi, remote in Terengganu, for that matter, apparently there's actually none of those restrictions come on board. And the other area that perhaps it needs to look in a bit more detail is in terms of how does one ensure that whether the methods, whether it is asynchronous, whether synchronous is an approach, because some of our experiences is that if you do asynchronous teaching, apparently you get actually better students, I guess, participation in the sense of they will ask actually more questions because they are not being, I guess, governed by their peers in terms of when you're in class, the loudest will always speak up, and if you are a bit more timid, you probably will not speak out. But in asynchronous teaching, apparently you get a lot more interaction with students in that manner, and you have got students who are able to sort of self-reflect, do their own research, do their homework before they actually submit the assignments, or even before they start talking to the rest of the team when it comes to a platform where they are given the opportunity to interact. So to me is that to address those sort of physical handicaps or physical restrictions, there are ways and means of actually addressing them. And I'm sure this is just the beginning of what we see. Perhaps as we move forward, you'll probably see much more innovative, much more creative approaches to address some of these issues that you have mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, for the participants out there, if you have any innovations or suggestions, we'd love to see those in the chat as well. I'm sure there's wonderful things going on all over Malaysia, and it's good to be able to exchange, best practice and innovative ideas. For now, Elizabeth, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. And I'm sure as a private institution, this isn't the first time you've been asked this question. We know that in the United States, for example, there is a conversation being inspired by students who question why they're being asked to pay the high fees associated with a comprehensive campus education when they're being asked to transition to online. So what is your perspective on that? Because obviously a lot of students are going to be saying, even though the courses can be brought online, there are going to be things as part of my experience I will not be able to do because I'm not on campus.
I think one of the things that we need to change, and it's mindsets again. Now, not so much the educators' mindset, but the students and their parents' mindsets. Online education is not meant to be cheap or in any way inferior. Everyone, it has been forced to go online. It may not be something that we prefer at all. In fact, it isn't, because we're so used to teaching face-to-face and having all this wonderful interaction, having them all come to what we call the most happening campus. And we miss that, and so online education is not something that we favor. But unfortunately, the circumstances has come about in such a way that we are all forced into this situation to go online. And having gone online, we're finding that it's really not so bad, as Dato' Rahim has also mentioned, because we're noticing that as students adapt and as staff adapt as well, they're beginning to discover that some actually say that they can concentrate a lot more. They don't have to rush all the way to college and to university. They can wake up and turn on their PCs and straight away be able to interact with their teachers, be part of a class, or to actually go back and look at work that has been uploaded, and lectures that have been uploaded, and they can go back and really read those because of a lack of internet connection or whatever. They had lost a bit of the class. They can actually go back and rewind, fast forward, and a little bit like us watching movies on demand, that kind of thing. So they're beginning to enjoy that a lot more, and online education has allowed for that to happen. Something that you don't understand, you can go back and revisit and look through again and say, I missed that. And we are also noticing that with some of the more introverted students, they are beginning to ask a lot more questions. It could be like Datuk say, you know, they don't have to worry about what their peers think about their questions. So they dare to ask more, or maybe they are not really a seen face, so they don't worry so much. I'm not quite sure what it is. So it is all happening, but it isn't cheap. It is very expensive because a lot more effort has to be expended.
Yes.
The staff alone, my goodness, there's no morning, there's no afternoon, there's no night, you know. Mornings morph into night and night into weekends, and students demand your immediate attention. And of course, as staff are also learning, so you know, they hardly have enough time to sleep, and so therefore I really want to take this opportunity to also thank them and give them a huge shout out, you know, for embracing this, and so and with such courage and immediacy, and for our students as well, and they have been just super troopers coming on board and taking this on. It's not just us, it's the whole world. In a Zoom meeting with the Vice Chancellor of Cambridge, who had called upon my chairman, Tan Sri Jeffrey, we were learning from him and from Cambridge themselves as to how they were coping. And I learned was that the British government said, no, there shall be no change in fees, because it is well recognized that you will have to put in so much more investment because technology will continue to change and make the experience better, faster, etc. So, and you have to keep catching up. I mean, I was just looking at the huge budget that has just come in for us to upgrade our staff, not PCs now, it's laptops.
Yes.
And which can transform into a pad and can follow the teacher and turn around and all that stuff. I haven't seen it, but this is what I'm being told, you know. And all these are will enable a much better online experience for the teachers, and obviously that would translate down to the students. And so, you know, yeah, it's not cheap, and so I wish that people would you know get away from this mindset that online education is cheap. But we do have to be mindful that COVID-19 has actually caused significant detrimental economic impact on many families, right? What we do is that we in this respect is that we encourage our students who face financial difficulties to actually discuss the situation with us. And many are unaware, but our education institutions are actually not-for-profit institutions which are owned and governed by the Jeffrey Chia Foundation. And so the income is really used to support the academic mission, including scholarships. And in fact, to date, our foundation has dispersed scholarships amounting to almost ₹500 million. So unlike many other private institutions in the country, we do not make profits from the fees the students pay. We actually do not give money to our shareholders, for example. And all the students' fees mainly go towards covering the salaries of the staff, of course, all the facilities and the resources for teaching and learning. So really, library support, IT, student life, and ongoing IT infrastructure investment. So there's a lot more that is happening there. So I would really like people to go away from this mindset, because let's not cheapen higher education.
Well, that's a good point. And as an author, I think there's an analogy here with ebooks. You know, very often I hear people say, why would we pay us, you know, why can't we have ebooks that cost nothing or just, you know, a few ringgits? And they tend to forget they're paying for the author's intellectual capital. They're paying for the design. You know, there are so many associated costs, even though the delivery is online and not actually as a physical book. Yeah. But anyway, we're coming to the top of the hour and we'll be moving very shortly because we have a number of questions. But before we do that, just for a minute or so for each of you, maybe we can conclude this on a positive note. I know that you have both expressed the opportunities and the innovations that are going on at the moment. What do you foresee as being one good thing that will come out of the COVID-19 pandemic experience with respect to changes in higher education? What do you see as the most important thing, Datuk?
For us, is the one-liner really is we see this so-called leapfrogging of distance education and speeding up the development of a borderless access to education, really.
Right, excellent, thank you. And Elizabeth?
Well, you know the saying, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Yeah.
And to me, it's been wonderful to see the resilience of the human spirit sailing through all the difficulties. It's forced us to think out of the box and to rely on each other a lot more. We're beginning to think of others other than ourselves and to reach out to them. It has also brought the world closer together. I mentioned a Zoom call with the Vice Chancellor of Cambridge, for example. Now, the irony is that as COVID-19 ravages the world, Mother Earth is actually healing. You know, we've seen countless evidence of rivers become clean and air pollution disappeared. So let's harness this catalytic potential of this experience to rethink our purpose, especially in the context of the role of education in making the world more sustainable and humanity more humane. The outpouring of positive tales of human heroism, you know, whether it is the doctor, the nurse, the frontliners, or the essential services, you know, the Grab food motorcyclists. You know, it has somewhat recalibrated our appreciation of what is truly important. So I certainly hope that this will bring communities more connected together, focusing on becoming more human and humane, as these are really the qualities that are going to ensure mankind's resilience to the many unprecedented challenges, not just as we are facing now, but eventually as we roll along, there will be a lot more challenges coming, I have no doubt.
That's wonderful, Elizabeth. Thank you. Well, just before we go to the Q&A, the chairman of MITE, Tan Sri Jahudin, is actually joining us, and I would like him to come in and perhaps offer your perspective, sir, on some of the points that we have been discussing over the last hour. Do we have Tan Sri?
You have to unmute. Yep. Oops.
Anusha?
Okay.
Can you help with that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good afternoon, and been listening to Dr. Rahim and Liz talking about this new, reality that we are facing. And today the focus is on education, which is not too far from me also, because I'm chairman of the board of one of the public universities. I'm chairman of UTEM, the University Technical Malaysia, Melaka. So, so far also we have been having a board meeting through, we'll be having one soon coming, either through circular resolutions or we'll be having our own through video conference, we hope. But managing, during this period, the students who were caught on campus and sending them home, I think there's still a few hundred still on campus that we have to, well, we're going to celebrate Hari Raya and doing their studies, and we have to manage this through. But yes, this is something that we at MIT have all been prior to the pandemic. We've been talking about the future of work and things that is going to come and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the future has come now, and we have to adjust and even from the start when it was announced that there will be this MCO. I reminded everyone at MIT and in other organizations that I'm involved that we are not on holiday. We are going to work, continue to work, but in a different environment, you know. So some people may take this as an opportunity to just stay away from work and be on holiday. But in reality, as managers, as leaders, we have to ensure that, Dato' Rahim used to be with me on the board of SIRIM, that like SIRIM, we are to serve the public, the industry, and they need service from us, and we have to continue to provide this service, and to find ways to reach out and so on. So in education, it's the same thing, but there are new realities that we have to deal with, I think. One of it is the way to deliver education. It is a continuum. It's not abrupt thing. It's forced on us, but it is something that has to go on. Students are enrolled. Students get to go to classes and get to, be taught lessons, do their work, and so on, and they will graduate in due course. And new students will be coming in this. So while we manage the changes that is happening, we have to deal with the reality that this is something that we just cannot stop the flow and manage this as we go. So it's very interesting to hear comments from, one from the public university, a major one, UST Malaya, and the other one from Sunway. And I know what Sunway, the good work that Tan Sri Defricia, the foundation, and so on doing. He's in touch with me. He keeps on sending a lot of the things that he sends out to the staff and so on. But that's what leaders are supposed to do: communicate. Yes. As we try to manage this. And I'm glad to hear that your comment, Liz, about MQA, because they too have got to come in seriously to look at how to manage, to ensure quality as we move from the old paradigm, as it were, to the new paradigm. Yes. That this assurance of quality in the education has got to be maintained and assured. Yeah. So those are just my brief comments. I didn't expect to be called, but anyway, since I'm called, so I have to say something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. And in fact, I'd like to give a shout out also to MITE's Foresight Division, because they've been helping institutions anticipate circumstances that are probably not as unanticipated as many people think. That's the great joy of foresight, is to be able to look and anticipate what could happen in the future and then plan and prepare so that we're not caught, short-footed when something extreme or exceptional happens. So let me open it up to Q&A now. Now we have a question here from Farah. And this is a great one because it's one that I didn't get to. Let me ask you this, Datuk Rahim. How can online learning be integrated with the R&D environment? If you think about the graduate realm too, it involves field work or working collaboratively in a lab. None of those things are well suited to an online environment. So what are your plans for those areas of study? What do you think can be done there?
Obviously, there are programs that requires the practical elements that could not actually be done online, which the students themselves will have to come onto campus and undertake those so-called, I guess, courses or interventions that requires them to do hands-on. So my take on this is that online learning itself, it is not a silver bullet which addresses all that it's all and sundry. So, for example, the postgraduate students that requires lab work and so on, they will definitely need to come on board. Yeah. Unfortunately, in this particular situation, you need to make sure that you have the so-called health and safety protocol being observed while they are actually on campus. But when the MCO is over and so on and so forth, they will definitely be required to do so. And when you look at postgraduates, normally they actually have more flexibility than the so-called undergraduate students, because the undergraduate students are actually practically very structured as far as the programs are concerned. So we definitely will need students to come on campus. The issue is that how would you actually balance this? I guess, as I mentioned earlier, one of the, I guess our mission is not just to disseminate knowledge per se, but in terms of developing a student in terms of their values, in terms of their attributes, yeah, the richness of the interactions that they get on campus. Now, how do you actually blend this to make sure that those sides, especially the emotional side, the softer side, are also catered for? Or else, if you do 100% online alone, then you will miss all of this. Yeah. So, to a certain extent, if you take, for example, architecture or even medicine or even engineering for that matter, you could still use technology through VR, through AR, in terms of intervention, but that still, I guess, will not provide you 100% face-to-face interaction that's required. And you can do simulation for sciences and so forth, but you still need to do some wet sciences, go to the lab and do some things. So you have this in and out approach where you provide that sort of platform or an atmosphere where that skill can actually be developed. So all in all, it is going to be a hybrid type of approach as far as online remote learning is concerned. And we have the opportunity for us that we have got a number of residential colleges on site where we would be able to take, I guess, students on board when they come in, say for a month to be on site to do certain work that requires the practical aspect of it. And we need to come up with that sort of new model as to how do we approach that intervention in that sense. So you still can provide some solution to it. It's not just online all the way 100% in that manner. It's not.
Elizabeth, do you have something, because obviously you've got PhD students, what might you want to add there in terms of what can be done to ensure that collaboration, teamwork and all the other skills that are necessary are at their disposal?
Yeah, I'd actually like to look at the whole thing as well. I actually think that curricula will have to change in the long run. We need to involve industry much more to develop a lot more hands-on learning during internship, for example, so that they become a lot more industry relevant as well. But of course, for the short term, because this has just hit us just like that, what we plan to do is once the students return to campus, we will then have to probably provide them with practical camps, as we call them, for them to then immerse themselves into the psychomotor elements of the specific practical skills needed. So that they will have a comprehensive experience. And in the meantime, our current solution has also been to organize lab demonstrations through video recordings so that the students can appreciate the technical aspects of these practical skills. But the students are are also provided with simulated experimental data to develop their inferences and to arrive at conclusions, for example, so that we are able to simultaneously develop their cognitive components of these specific subjects. You mentioned PhD. It's true that our MSc and PhD by research postgrad students have definitely been the hardest hit, as they have not been allowed basically to access the on-campus facilities and equipment to conduct their research. And even though we have formulated strategies to ensure to minimize lost time, such as their research supervisors working with them to use their downtime to write and analyze their research and to publish their work and also reflect and plan their research strategy. So this is what we've been doing. Thus, I'm actually very glad that the government recently announced that the postgrad students by research could return back to campus to resume their research work, as long as, of course, social distancing is maintained and all our health SOPs are followed. But we truly have to look at new educational innovations, because as technology and knowledge advance, new opportunities will arise to shift our current paradigm that is heavily shaped by all these traditional teaching methods. At the Sunway iLabs, we have a very innovative young man by the name of Matt Van Leeuwen, and he's also from Cambridge, by the way. And we are currently exploring various opportunities to innovate our education delivery, perhaps leveraging on the untapped potential of AR and VR technologies that Datuk Rahim himself also alluded to just now.
Okay, great. We have a question here from Datuk Yusuf, who is the CEO of MITE. Here's an interesting question for you. Remote and online learning may require a new revenue model for universities. Is the model readily implemented? Does this also mean that new non-traditional players would provide competition to existing traditional universities? Might we see the higher education equivalent of Uber, for example, you know, a kind of Uber education or something along those lines? Datuk Rahim, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I mentioned a bit earlier that we are actually provided an opportunity now to I guess extend the enrollment, not just I guess within Malaysia itself, but all over the world, because you can now learn wherever you are. Yeah, I mean, you are actually not restricted to just Malaysia alone, but elsewhere. And we are also given the opportunity to do the so-called micro-credentialings, micro-credentials, where you take specific courses or part of courses, then you build it up into a program, and provided that you require it for specific reasons, maybe to enhance your career or to upgrade and upskill yourself in specific areas. So you're actually being provided that. And also, I guess the platform provides us with so-called other educational resources at the same time. Yeah, because we talked about MOOCs previously, somehow or other it sort of has flattened out. Now it can actually be something which again be given a new, I guess, breath of I guess life into it to move on and provide this so-called programs, which you take it not just your own MOOCs, but elsewhere. Yeah, you blend it with your own program, and you come up with something which perhaps is not just a standard program that you allow people to take. So it can actually be a sort of a manual-driven program now. Yeah, if someone comes on board, that the person wants to blend law with environment, with medical on board. Now, how can the universities provide that? So you actually provide a platform where really creative, innovative way of providing the so-called learner with, I guess, knowledge that is required for that specific person, which comes back to my notion of personalized learning. Yeah. So then the question is that now how do you then I guess cost it out in that manner? Now this is actually early days. I'm sure some others have done it through I guess costing it through we call it credit hours and so on and so forth. That has been the standard approach. Perhaps there could be other ways of costing it out. Yeah. But if I want to touch again about you were asking just now about the costs of the program itself. As far as public universities, we are still subsidizing more than 50% of the total cost of the program as such. So it's a question of whether it is high or low. It's all relative. And to maintain a campus which is still required for remote learning, it is I guess the sunk cost or the cost of maintaining that is still very much in the equation. Yeah. So we are given that opportunity, and the question is that how that is going to be costed out and so on and so forth. I guess it's going to be work in progress, and you'll see all sorts of models that are going to come up, and hopefully this is something which is not going to be dictated by the policymakers or the regulators, because this is completely out from the norm. Yeah. And that's going to be something of a challenge for all of us.
Elizabeth, would you like to add anything to that? Are you worried about future competition where some kind of Uberized university or you know, a kind of approach or a model that we currently haven't seen is going to come into your sector and give you a run for your money?
I think it's already except that a lot of us did not realize it because the traditional universities are so big and so powerful. But nevertheless, you know, the likes of Minerva University, the School, now Ecole 42, for example, all these are the very new institutions that are sprouting up, and they could very much be this Uberization of education or universities as we see it. Ecole 42 is something that we have taken on board and about to launch actually. And it's one of these new schools that we used to laugh, you know, and they're not supposed to be any professors or lecturers. They learn from their peers. And the wonderful thing is that there are not even fees being charged, you know. But what it does is that it teaches students skills that they need for the industry. And so we hope very much for industry to actually help to pay for the honing of their talents for them. So yes, Uberization of university and higher education could be very, very much on us already.
Right, and again, that's where foresight is useful. That would be an interesting project to look at as to if that does come down the pike in the near future, what you would need to place, or what any higher education institution would need to put in place in order to effectively compete with that new model. But let me jump to Izam, and I do hope I have pronounced your name correctly, has made a couple of points. It kind of goes back to something we discussed earlier. He says, I do agree that asynchronous learning is the choice mode, you know, in these difficult times. However, both students and lecturers need to learn to effectively do it. He wonders whether in the Malaysian learning environment, whether there's been whether enough students are ready to embrace digital learning and the discipline that they need in order to reap from it. Again, we're asking a lot of students, particularly the undergraduate level, I think, to be able to take more responsibility for their learning if they're not going to be in a classroom. So, Datuk Rahim, what would you say to Izham on those questions or that point?
I think we would actually be surprised that with the I guess the autonomy that's given to the students in terms of how they learn and so on and so forth, they are actually taking this challenge with gusto and with a lot of responsibility at the same time, because we are actually tracking even the attendance, yeah, of in fact the attendance of online learning is much better than in classes, because in classes you actually forced to be in class at a certain time of the day and so on and so forth. Whereas here, if you don't do a synchronous, I guess, learning, you then allow the students to come on board as and when they are ready to come on board. And you'd be surprised that the attendance is 90% and above. Because I keep asking our lecturers, what sort of experience have you got from all this? And the experience has been positive, because I think the millennials and the new generation takes it to them almost like duck to water. It is their, I guess it's their playground as far as technology is concerned and so on and so forth. And you provide them with the opportunity of doing it at their own time, because they don't like to sort of be determined. Thou shalt come at this specific time and so on and so forth. So you provide them with that flexibility. I think they are responding quite well in instance. In fact, I'm asking the lecturer, can we then collect all this data so that we understand better in terms of what else that needs to be done in terms of improving the so-called offering that we are going to do through this remote and online learning. So that has been our experience. A bit surprising, but I don't think it is a surprise. Sometimes we think a bit negative on those things, but understanding the background of the students and how they behave and so on and so forth, it is actually not quite, I guess, negative in that sense.
Yeah, and I think too, in addition to the attendance issue, we should never forget that just because someone is physically in a classroom, whether they're actually engaging in active learning, you can still be passive, you can still be daydreaming, you can still be, I don't know, playing around on your iPad or your iPhone. So it doesn't mean to say learning is happening just because you're physically on the premises. But Elizabeth, let me ask you this. This is a question from Joyce, because we've talked, quite a bit about the flexibility of online learning and how important that is. She's concerned, at the end of the day, however, can flexibility guarantee quality? So we're looking at that connection between a flexible education, but everybody is still looking for a quality education. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't see flexibility and quality as being, I don't see how they connect at all, because flexibility just allows for us to, in this sense, as Dr. mentioned just now, to be able to learn according to our own time, for example, and also to our own needs, because some students may be slower, so they need to go back and see what it is that the lecturer has said, and now he can play back and some want to fast forward. That's fine and well. So that flexibility is there, but as for quality, it is inherent. It is supposedly ensured. You know what I mean? So the flexibility and the quality, I don't see how it compares. Maybe I'm getting the question wrong.
No, I think you're making a good point there. When it comes to quality, it's a two-way street, isn't it? also. You know, there needs to be the motivation from the students in addition to the flexibility and what it is the institution is able to bring about. So that segues very neatly to a question from Fiona, and we're probably going to make this the last one because we're coming down to the bottom of the hour. She said online education and lifelong learning is good skills. She thanked us for our expert sharing session. Here's the question, Datuk, if I could ask you this. How can institutions of higher learning like universities, university educators motivate students who are less motivated, or even to become, you know, digitally savvy? This is right up my street, because educational psychology, it was all about providing the right emotion and motivational aspects in order to get the most out of learning. So what do we do in an online only environment to make sure that those students who are less motivated and less digitally savvy are going to be totally engaged in this kind of in-depth active learning experience that they're going to need around their particular subject matter?
My take on this is that in the first instance, when you actually enroll in any course or program for that matter, automatically there is the interest in terms of wanting to either upskill, upgrade, or get a degree in that sense. So I guess the motivation is already there. I guess the issue really is that how would you actually motivate someone to learn better or deeper for that matter in specific course or a specific environment as such. Now this is where it comes in terms of the designing of that program itself. If you make the program or the course itself interesting, yeah, make it then a bit more interactive in that sense, you will find that the motivation factor is actually very high. I mean, you mentioned earlier that if you have a big class of 200, for example, the guys in the first 3 rows will be the one that's focused. The guys at the back and so on and so forth, perhaps looking at the iPad or looking at the iPhones and probably Googling in terms of what is the lecturer talking about in that sense, because knowledge is at their fingertips. But if you have got someone that's put together, which is going to be interactive, yeah, in a, I guess either you go synchronous or asynchronous for that matter, then there is always that interest in terms of what would the ideas be, because you become very personalized in that sense. And to further I guess the discussion is that you are no longer restricted to that hour or 2 hours of lecture. You are actually continuously engaging that person throughout the day, because you are actually answering their queries, and you are doing all those sort of things that requires learning to be effective. So in that sense, I believe that there is actually more motivation by the students to learn, because you have got somebody who's actually being able to respond, yeah, I guess effectively, quickly, and that's where perhaps the face-to-face, if you have big classes and so forth, will not be able to be undertaken. And this is again something which we have asked our lecturers to do a bit more, I guess, findings, not research, but to make sure that these are all taken care of and be able to motivate the students so that they become better learners overall.
Yeah, and I think also that peer support is so important when it comes to motivation. And let's face it, there's still opportunities. I mean, millennials should be really good at this in terms of how they congregate together. You know, we have WhatsApp groups, Facebook. I mean, we've got so many platforms, Zoom, so many opportunities. It just takes a little bit of creativity, maybe some leadership on the part of some students to put these kind of things in place. Now, we are at the bottom of the hour. Let me just have this final question. Elizabeth, perhaps you could briefly respond to this. Professor Cibareo, I again hope I have pronounced your name correctly. COVID-19 has hit the reset button of educational institutions all over the world, regardless of age, rank, or reputation. It's now time for all HLI to compete in leading the new norm of education, in identifying champions of this new era. What's your stand on this? And maybe in terms of what Malaysia is going to be able to show the world in terms of champions? Elizabeth.
I think the champion will be the one who is fastest to change, to embrace change, and to transform. Whether we like it or not, as I've mentioned, higher education has to be transformed. It may not fit at all in this new era. Change was seeping in, as I mentioned earlier on. Maybe it was not so well accepted, but because now we have been all pushed online, you know, what is the difference between Cambridge University and Open University for that matter? You know what I mean? You don't need to have a competition, a university challenge to compare the two anymore. You know, right now, you know, whose online education could be a lot more superior for all you know. So it's a completely different playing field altogether. The goalposts have been changed entirely, and so the champion would be the one who can change and transform. It's not just about changing, it's about transforming like the Transformers, right? You transform to the environment and you thrive and you go out there and brave the new world. It's very much that the way I see it, that the champion who shall emerge from all this would be the one who is able to ride the COVID wave. But it's not just COVID. COVID is just an enabler for the change that happened. It was inevitable that this was going to have to happen for the future to come on board. I mean, we've been talking about IR 4.0 for a while now. As to how it was going to transform us, we didn't really know. We just knew that it was about digital. We knew that it was about robots, maybe even flying cars. But then it's no more a dream world. This is the reality. And so therefore, my very fast answer would be the champion would be the one who can embrace this and who can transform whatever we're doing, who can transform our institution to fit into this new reality and to thrive.
That is wonderful. I have so enjoyed this conversation, Datuk Rahim and Elizabeth. Thank you so much. I hope our participants have got a lot out of it too. I think this format of organic discussion works very well, especially for a topic such as this one. So thank you both so very much for sparing your time to contribute to this, the third of our Road to Recovery series. And thank you to all the participants who sent comments and messages, and for so many of you staying on to the end as well. That's wonderful. So let me just wrap it up very quickly, and then I'll hand it back to Anusha. You know, overall, I think what we need to remember is we human beings are incredible. We're incredible, creative, innovative solution finders. And it's very often when we are faced with these very dramatic, uncertain circumstances that, you know, we really step up to the plate and come up and find new ways of doing things that are going to, as Datuk Rahim and Elizabeth have both said, completely change the landscape for higher education in a way that everybody in years to come is probably going to look back and thought, we used to do that, you know, how much better it is. I was looking online, the World Economic Forum was saying, just as an example of creativity, students in Japan are attending graduation ceremonies as robots. You know, those little robots that wander around and they've got a screen, you can have your face on it, and they're operating them remotely at home so that they can still maintain social distance, but there's still an actual ceremony going on. So, I mean, that's wonderful. You both mentioned the importance of mindset from the perspective of university leaders who perhaps need to shake off that, what's often called the curse of expertise, and to unlearn and learn new ways of doing things. The partnership that we need, obviously, with the government and with industry as well. But I think this will be a very exciting time, and there's probably been no better time for there to be a revolution in higher education. So thank you again, everyone, for your contribution. And now I'm going to hand it over to Anusha, who will wrap things up. Oh, before we do that, can I actually also, in addition to thanking the speakers and the participants, you know, remember, as both our speakers have said, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that make something like this possible. So I would like to give a shout out to Anusha and Farah and Izan and anybody else whose name I haven't mentioned from the wonderful MITE team that have made this such smooth running. Great example of digital communication at its very best. So thank you, team. Over to you, Anusha.
Thank you to our moderators and panelists for a fruitful discussion. Great job, gang. And hope today's talk has benefited everybody. We look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar session, episode 4 in June. Please follow on MITE's Malaysia, Twitter, IG, Facebook, and website for further information. You also can contact our secretariat to subscribe to MITE's webinar series. Have a nice day and Selamat Hari Raya.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. 2 thumbs up. Bye-bye.
Bye.